So with that, I will introduce Chris Joffe, and from Joffe Emergency Services, right, Chris? I just know it as Joffe. And he will introduce our other speaker, and we'll get going. Chris?
Thanks, Martha, and good morning, everyone. As Martha shared, I think what we're hoping to do in this conversation is kind of the update, the 2.0 version of that webinar we held, and I can't believe it was January. It seems like it was years ago now, but just in January. And so we're going to dive right in, and we debated clever, funny earthquake jokes or references to some of the earthquakes that we experienced here in Southern California from a few weeks ago. But what we landed on for our opener was this sort of moving image. This is a satellite image of the Ridgecrest earthquake that occurred the week of July 4th. And it's sort of incredible to us to just sit and watch this. And I won't tell you how long we watched this, well, I won't tell you. Nonetheless, as we watched this, one of the things that we were thinking about is that I think as a state, we were really fortunate that this earthquake took place in a location that wasn't really densely populated. There weren't hundreds of thousands or even millions of people in the area. And that significantly reduced the damage that it had the opportunity to cause. But it also, without question, has sparked curiosity about earthquakes, about preparedness, about early warning, and about making sure that we as individuals, as families, and then as school communities are all doing as much as we can do to be prepared should the next earthquake, or should any earthquake for that matter, occur in a more densely populated area like Los Angeles, the Bay Area, San Diego, etc. Our presenters today are myself and Martha, as well as Todd Nisley, who is from Earthquake Early Warning Labs. And they are the organization that actually designs and builds this technology that enables us to have access to ShakeLA, or the Earthquake Early Warning System. And so we'll hear from Todd in just a moment, but we're really excited to have him with us and to be able to ask some of the technical questions about this product and about what it can do for our schools and our communities. Todd, I'll turn it over to you for a second to kind of just do a quick refresher on some of the conversation that we had back in January.
Well, earthquake early warning is the important thing for everyone to know is this is the USGS network. There's seismic sensors up and down the West Coast from the Mexican border to the Canadian border. And the technology is basically, there's, oh, here you go, quick refresher. The network in and of itself works like a thunder and lightning. So when the network attacks the earthquake, our technology outruns the earthquake. And we meet up with the USGS, and then we send an audio alert to all of our customers. And we do that by connecting to your PA systems at your school. And for instance, on the last earthquake we had a few weeks ago, we were able to give 50 seconds of warning to our clients in the LA area. Fortunately for this one, because it was far away, we had lots of lead time. But that's the gist of it. We are a partner of the USGS. Currently, we're the only ones offering a hardened enterprise/school solution that will work for you.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd. We'll show a quick video of this, and there are two reasons that we're showing this video. The first is that I think when I think about earthquake early warning, it's always really hard for me to conceptualize it, or at least it was hard for me to conceptualize it until I actually had the opportunity to see it all in action. I will share with you that this video is intentionally sort of observing it take place in action, but for those that have been through severe earthquakes in the past, it can be scary, it can be frightening, and frankly, even for those who haven't been through earthquakes in the past, this can be a little bit jarring. So this is not intended to jar you by any means, and we certainly invite you to take, it's about a 90-second video, so if it would be helpful to you to turn down the audio for a few moments, more than welcome to do that. The second reason, I shouldn't have said you can do that yet. The second reason that we wanted to share you this video is because it's really, it helps to kind of articulate that what our goal is with earthquake early warning is not anything different than our goal in a regular earthquake. Put differently, a lot of times when we talk about earthquake early warning, schools in particular say, well then should we, if we know there's an earthquake coming, should we run outside? Should we run across the street? Should we move into a different room? And truth be told, the benefit of earthquake early warning is the opportunity to have more time to drop, cover, and hold. Of course, if an earthquake occurred and we didn't have earthquake early warning, we would do just that. We would drop, cover, and hold. But giving ourselves a few extra seconds up to that 50 seconds that Todd was talking about earlier to drop, cover, and hold really makes a significant impact on our ability to make sure that we and our kids stay safe. Many of you know that in a typical classroom, especially in today's world, you may not have tons of desks to drop, cover, and hold under. And so it may give you an extra second to scout some other opportunities. In many of our offices, especially our heads of school offices, we've seen desks start to disappear. And so again, that's somebody who has an opportunity now to take a few extra seconds to find that drop, cover, and hold. If we're outdoors and we need to look up and look around and see what might be around us and cause some potential damage, that again gives us a few extra seconds. And so what we're really doing here with the earthquake early warning system is we're buying time. And that's our most valuable asset when it comes to really any emergency, but especially natural disasters like earthquakes. And so without any further ado, I'll go ahead and start the video. Again, it'll be about 90 seconds. So if you're somebody who's experienced a severe earthquake and would like to turn down the audio, that will help lessen it just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and hit play now.
Once there was a bull named Bill who felt a certain thrilling chill each time he saw a china shop. The teacups made his heart flip-flop. He couldn't help but to cry and pout. For each store's sign read, "Bulls keep out."
Earthquake. Drop, cover,
Children,
hold on.
there's an
Strong
earthquake.
shaking expected.
Duck, cover, and hold.
Earthquake. Drop, cover, hold on. Strong shaking expected. Earthquake. Drop, cover, hold on.
Oops. Let's see if I can unshare the screen now. There we go. So as you can see in that video, our goal is to make sure that we give ourselves time to drop, cover, and hold, that we give ourselves an opportunity to give calm instructions to students. And then there's an added layer, and I didn't mention this before very intentionally, but there's also an opportunity through ShakeLA or through the earthquake early warning system to cause some other activities to take place. A couple of things that stand out to us as business continuity folks and emergency preparedness folks are if you have a server system and you have a local server that's on campus, earthquake early warning gives you an opportunity to shut that down before the power goes out, before there's a surge, before the UPS drops offline, wires can become disconnected, etc. And it enables you to shut it down in a potentially healthier way. For schools that have gates, it may give you an opportunity to open those gates so that as the fire department and other first responders need to get to campus, that they have access before those gates become lodged or jammed because of the earthquake. For those that have generators, may give you an opportunity to turn those generators on before the shaking starts so that there's not a drop in power, or that drop in power is minimized depending on what type of generator you have. And so really the early warning system as a whole is about giving you as an organization the tools you need and the time you need to cause some different things to take place. One of the big things or big takeaways we had from our January conversation was that you had questions. And so before we go into any of the other details about this system, I'd like to open it up to you. What are your questions? As you think about rolling out the earthquake early warning system or ShakeLA in your community, what are some of the challenges you might anticipate? Or what are some of the ways in which you think it might actually take hold? So I'll open it up and I'll share with you that we'd like you to unmute yourself to ask your question, share out your question. Either Todd, myself, Martha, or Bobby on our team will answer that question. And then you're welcome to remute yourself or of course, ask another one. I'll turn it over to you now.
Chris, I'm looking at ShakeAlert LA, and it only shows magnitude 5 or greater. So we wouldn't have known about the 4.1 that recently hit on this app just a few weeks ago. Is there any kind of controls on this, or?
That is such a great question. I'll take a first pass at this, and Todd, feel free to adjust anything here. So for those that are in the LA area, there's an app that exists called ShakeLA LA. And if you're using ShakeAlert LA, you'll receive notification that an earthquake is coming if it falls within the parameters that the app has prescribed. Now, a lot of people have said, is there any benefit to having ShakeAlert installed in my school and integrated into my PA system or my fire alarm system when I have the app, right? And the short answer is absolutely. There are two challenges that go along with the app. The first is that the app is controlled by the city of Los Angeles and was intentionally designed by the city of Los Angeles. And so one of the parameters that's installed is that the earthquake has to cause relatively moderate shaking within LA County in order for the app to trigger a message. The second caveat with the app is that it's an app and it's on your phone, and your phone is potentially on silent. There's not an ability yet to tie into the mass messaging system that the president uses or that we use for Amber Alerts. Those systems can override the silence feature on most phones, but the earthquake early warning program can't do that yet. In the future, it may be able to, but at this point it can't. And so if your phone's on silent, if you're in a meeting, if your phone's in your pocket and you get a lot of messages during the day and you don't pull your phone out and take a look at it with each message, then you may actually not receive that notification. So on the solutions side, by installing the early warning system into your campus or integrating it into your PA system, you become the master of the parameters that you'd like to respond to or that you'd like your community to respond to. And so for some communities, in fact, this is the case for, I think it's a local library. I think it's, and I don't think I can say it, but I think it's a local library. They've adjusted the settings down to 3.5. So if shaking were to be anticipated at a scale of 3.5 or greater, then the notification would go out. I believe there's also a public school that's done the same thing. And so you absolutely have the capacity to adjust the level of response that you want to cause. I would flag that there's some caveats with that. The system, of course, is susceptible to the ground movement. I was at the Caltech seismology lab on Tuesday and listening to a talk about this. And one of the things that they highlighted there was that when a quarry blast takes place or when a missile is launched in another part of the world, all of those things are going to cause ground movement. And so if your settings are really, really low, you'll have a few extra false alarms. And again, that's okay, especially in a school environment. If we're just doing a drop, cover, and hold, and then everybody's back up, causes a little bit of angst, it causes a little bit, maybe even a lot of anxiety for a few moments. And as we get more accustomed to this, just like a false fire alarm, the community should build resilience toward that and should become more comfortable with those notices going off.
Chris, this is Martha. Can you talk a little bit about the rest of the state? We talk a lot about Southern California because that's kind of where things started rolling out first. And of course, we just had a good reminder over the 4th of July. But can you talk a lot about how all of this, why people in Northern California should be on this webinar and what they can be expecting?
Absolutely. So ShakeLA as an app is of course designed for just the city and the county. Well, it's really just designed for the city, but available in the county of Los Angeles. There is a Bay Area version of that app that we'll be rolling out in the future, and Todd can probably speak a little bit more to that. That said, that app will have the same limitations that the app down in Los Angeles has, right? It's going to be, the notifications are going to be prescribed by the city or the county or whomever it is that paid for the app. And for a variety of reasons, because it's a publicly available tool, they're going to make different decisions than we might at a school, right? As a county or a city, some of their concerns are what happens with residents, what happens with first responders, what happens with senior living facilities, et cetera. Whereas at a school, we can just think about our own community. We don't have to think that broadly. So those same limitations will apply. On the flip side, one of the big challenges of living in California is that we have this great big San Andreas fault that runs from Southern California all the way up north. And there are dozens of other faults that are active, both in Northern California and in Southern California. And so one of the things that we find is that we've got the same level of shaking or the same severity of shaking that can occur in San Francisco, and arguably worse up in Eureka, in the far northern part of the state, and frankly, even San Diego. The further east you go, the less that shaking or the less damage is anticipated, the less damage we know can be caused, I should say. But we, on the coasts in particular, have this massive fault that runs or causes the same risk for us in both Northern California and Southern California. One of the things I talk about a lot when we're doing just regular preparedness conversations is with sort of risk management and thinking about where we're going to prioritize our time and our resources. One of the things we should always do is start with a risk assessment and say, what are our biggest risks? And if they happen, how big of a deal are they? And consistently across the state of California, maybe save Sacramento, one of our top 3 risks is earthquake. And our severity on it is pretty significant. Our likelihood of it occurring is pretty significant. And so it causes it to be in the top 3 list for most schools in the state of California. And unfortunately, geography doesn't help until you get to Sacramento and east of there. As I say that, Todd, is there anything you would add about the app up in Northern California, as well as sort of risk and design of the ShakeLA program?
Well, in Northern California, actually to all of California, we will be rolling out our app, Early Warning Labs app, which is called Quake Alert. And that is still using the USGS Shake Alert network. Different than the LA network is we actually allow you to control when you want to be notified at the individual level. But still, it's a consumer grade solution that is being offered for free. So we're going to do best effort. And as was alluded to earlier, there are still limitations with with messaging and wireless networks. So the difference is our enterprise, I keep saying enterprise, I'm sorry, but our school-based solution, it actually uses IP. It's a box, or it can be a software. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's using IP, which the latency, as you know, is very small. With the cell phone networks, we're just not there yet. It's something that the carriers and the USGS, everyone's working together to get there, but we're just not there yet. So that's why many people are using our, I'm going to call it a hardened solution as a way of doing it. But yes, our network, the plan is to roll it out this fall, and it will not just be the state, Bay Area, it's going to be the entire state of California, and we're building it right now.
Phenomenal. One of the other questions I've heard people ask quite a bit is, is there a guarantee of notification? Is there, am I always going to get a notification before the earth starts shaking? Todd, can you talk a little bit about the technology and how the notifications are caused?
Unfortunately, no, you're not. We can't guarantee. There's no SLA. If you think about the way it works, is every earthquake has two portions to it: a P wave, which is the primary wave that starts everything for us, and then the secondary wave. And if you are right on top of the fault, if you think about it, like a pebble going into a pond and the ripples coming out, we're not going to be able to give you that much warning if you're right on top of the fault. You're looking at, it could be no warning, it could be 3 seconds, or it could be over a minute. Like I said, the last one, for LA-based customers, we had 50 seconds worth of warning. So it's just, if you think about the science behind it, if you're literally on top of the fault, it's not going to be of much use. But as Chris alluded to earlier, we're not just, if you ever pull up a California fault map, they're everywhere. We're not just worried about the San Andreas. So that's my answer to that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think to reiterate what Todd said there at the end, for anybody who is thinking, oh, well, I'm right on top of the San Andreas, so I'll skip this system. I just want to flag that, again, there are dozens, hundreds of faults in California. And so it's not just that fault that's going to move. In fact, that fault hasn't moved in some time. And that's what's causing all of our concern about the quote unquote next big one. What other questions do you have as you think about rolling the system out, as you think about the technology, the science behind it? What other questions come to your minds?
Chris, this is Martha. So as you think about what schools should consider when they're talking about instituting or working with a system like this, what kinds of primary discussion should be having at the school level and who should be involved with it? So, obviously there's facilities and all of that, but who else really needs to be involved in the discussions about what one can expect from this system, what sort of technology needs, who should be involved at a school level, and what should they be thinking about?
That's a great question. So I think that the starting point is somebody has to be excited about this. And so it might be you that's on the call this morning. I hope it is. It might be a parent, it might be a student even, but somebody has to be excited about this and has to be willing to do a little bit of learning. And it's not a steep learning curve. I mean, much of what we've talked about today is what we would ask you to share with others on campus. But there does have to be a single point of contact, somebody who can kind of own the process. In addition to that person who's excited, you're probably going to want to engage at least your facilities team or your operations team, your IT team, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then your team leads, it might be through your safety committee, it might be through some other types of groups that exist on campus, but anybody who's leading search and rescue or first aid or any of the other teams that exist on campus, I think that's a really important audience to try to engage early in the process. There's some question as to whether boards need to approve this or this needs to be a head of school or senior admin type discussion. And certainly I wouldn't want to make a recommendation for every school about who should make the decision. I would say there's pretty low risk associated with this because it's a technology that's evolving like AEDs were 20 years ago. There are limited consequences of installing the system and the costs are pretty low. So for many schools, I would imagine it doesn't need to be at least a board decision and potentially even a senior admin decision or a heads council, whatever it might be for you. So to reiterate those people, I would say operations, facilities, a champion, somebody who's excited about it, IT, and then your team leads for your different strike teams. And then I would incorporate it into your standard summer or fall PD. So when you come back in the fall, and in fact, our team's doing, I've lost count at this point, it's like, it's too many professional development conversations around incident command and earthquakes and lockdowns and fires and all those things. I would encourage you to incorporate at least 15 to 30 minutes on earthquake early warning in that first year. And then, of course, do some repeat conversations throughout the year. You never want to have a conversation like this just once. And I'll get into some of what those agenda items might look like.
Hey, Chris, can I, oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
What we're finding, another possibility is using it as a soft dollar benefit. We're finding that some private schools, some apartment buildings, condo towers, it's when people are deciding, you know, like for instance, if a parent was deciding which school to send their child to, all things being equal, if one school has early warning and the other doesn't, it's a big, you know, it's an extra check mark in your column for a relatively low investment. This is something to consider. It never occurred to me when I first got into this, but I'm hearing it more and more from landlords and from schools.
Oh, very interesting.
Chris, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So having it go on the PA system is great, but let's put it to the other way, as we saw on the on what you showed, which was on the person's cell phone. Any legal information, any kickback that you've seen, heard about some people that don't want to put items on their cell phones that are not personal for them?
David, I want to tag on to that too, because that you're asking the question I was going to, which is, since it's available to individuals and some people at a school may have it and some people may not, and how does that affect things?
Great questions. Todd, I'll let you speak more to the app side. Do you want to talk a little bit about the app and just on the tech side, sort of what that looks like, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the policy and the legal side?
Well, I haven't run into that. I mean, obviously, if some teachers have it on their phone and some don't, it'll only go to the people that have it on their phone. I don't know what to do about that one.
Okay.
I have not heard anyone. I mean, there are some people that it's using location tracking because that's how it works. So if some people have issues with that, then, you know, obviously they have their own decision to make, but I haven't run into that.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question about sort of the distinction between the personal app, right? Like ShakeLA, for example, and then a personal app version of this enterprise version for schools. Is there a distinction in the thinking, like you need to install something on your personal phone to make sure that the school's system sends you a message?
No, they're completely unrelated. The idea is you put the enterprise system, again, there I go, into the school, and you know that's for your school day, and then you have the app for when you're at home and driving and going about your life.
The enterprise version will not send, would only send a PA message to it wouldn't send what we saw in that video of a little message to your phone.
Right. It would send, no, they're completely separate. It'll send a PA message, but there's also integration. Like some schools have radios and two-way radios in every classroom, or maybe even a phone system. We work with some phone systems, and we work with almost all radio systems. So some of our clients will trigger an alert. It goes out over the PA or the fire system. It also will go off on the IP-based phones and a two-way radio network. So you can have all of them going off at once if you want. But it's not related to your cell phone.
I'll jump kind of from there into the consequences of not hearing the message or not getting the message. For a lot of folks, and this is true with our emergency notification systems too. So for those of you that have Blackboard Connect or Titan, HST, or Regroup, or Everbridge, there is, if the user is required to install an app in order to receive a message, then there's an HR challenge. And there are some HR folks on the call who I'm sure can articulate this much better than I can, but I'll give it the best shot I can. What we found is that it has to be an option unless we're paying for the phone. So if we're paying for a work phone for somebody, then we can prescribe the apps that they have on that phone, both add to it and take them away. If it's somebody's personal phone, then it has to be optional to them whether they choose to add it or not. I will say we've installed various emergency notification systems over the last 4 or 5 years at dozens, maybe hundreds of schools. We haven't had as many issues as you would anticipate where people raise their hands and say, I don't want this. To Todd's point, the location tracking can be a little bit of a challenge for some. And we've been able to come up with some workarounds, turn it off when you're not on campus and things like that seem to solve the challenge for them. But the bottom line, the absolute bottom line is, even if somebody says, you know what, I don't want to have an app, I don't want to have any technology that's connected to my phone, I don't want you to even know my phone number, through the ShakeLA system, the message will go out through the PA system. Even if they don't hear it, right? They're in a music classroom, it's really, really loud, and for some reason they don't hear it. When the earth starts shaking, they're going to take the same action that they would have had they heard it. So they're still going to do the drop, cover, and hold. So we're not trying to shift user behavior, which is one of the really great things about this tool, and about sort of earthquake preparedness. It's not like we need to do different things. Instead, it's about giving them an opportunity to do it a little bit sooner. So to make a long story shorter, I'd love for everybody to have access in as many ways as possible. I'd like to put it on the phones. I'd like to put it on the TVs or smart boards that are in the rooms. I'd like to put it onto laptops. I'd like to put it onto signs. Some of that technology is available today. Other parts of that technology we're working on building. I'm using the global we. But at the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that I at least make it available to as many people as I can, as quickly as I can, and give people that opportunity to drop, cover, and hold. So I'll pause here for a second to say, how many of you feel like this is a system that you want to try to install? This is a system you want to try to implement, either this coming year, next year, at some point in the future?
How is this different from ShakeLA?
So the two fundamental differences between ShakeLA and integrating ShakeLA into campus are notification style and control over notifications. So notification style, meaning we can get it out through PA systems and to a theoretically wider audience. And then control over when those alerts come out, meaning right now ShakeLA is set at a 5. I believe public interest after the last couple of earthquakes actually has convinced the city that they need to drop that threshold. And I'm not sure exactly what that new threshold will be. But nonetheless, by installing the tool and integrating it into our own system, we get control over when we actually trigger those messages. And so if we wanted to, we could bring that number down as low as, if a 1.0 occurs, we could send out that message, or if a 3 or 3.5, which is probably a more reasonable middle ground, then we would deliver that message.
And Todd, at the risk of jumping ahead too much, can you maybe speak a little bit to one of the distinctions being, a conversation about the individual risks of your school and what that conversation looks like what you guys think about when you, because I think that to me is another big fundamental difference that Chris said, but just really the specificity, the variables that you guys take into account with an individual client.
Yeah, Todd, do you want to take a first pass at that?
Well, I didn't quite understand the question. Can you repeat it real quick?
Well, I think we're going to talk about it later, so I don't want to jump ahead too much. But the soil, for example, that a school is built. The conversation we would have is different. One of the distinctions.
Yeah, okay, I got where you're going now. Sorry about that. What we do with, again, let's not talk about the app right now. We're talking about our solution that integrates with your overhead paging system or phone or fire alarm, is that we take a look at, there's tools available online that lets us see what the soil is like at your location. And one of the things we were going to offer, and yeah, we are, yeah, maybe I'm getting ahead again. As if you'd like to have a more in-depth conversation, one of the things we talk about is how does the soil look where your school is located? So if you have a situation where you're in poor soil, you may want to set your thresholds lower than someone who's on bedrock, because magnitude, shaking that feels like a 4 can feel like a 5 if, hypothetically, there's magnitudes, of course. But the shaking can be a lot worse. So we work with you to figure out per location what you want the threshold to be. And it's intensity of shaking, it's not magnitude. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Chris, can we go back to something, this is Martha. As far as the ability to then automate some responses based on an alert that the school has tied into their system, right? So you talked about the gates, you talked about generators, obviously there's the PA. So all of this is set automatically. So if you have 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 50 seconds, you get a little bit of a jump on it. Have you worked with an independent school that has done any of this integration or is about to do any of this integration? And I'm just curious what the discussion was.
Yeah, that's a great question. So candidly, independent schools have not, as far as I know, have not made the decision to move forward with earthquake early warning yet. I am thinking back to AEDs because in my head, at least, that's the most closely related sort of technology that has come out. And I can share that independent schools were a couple of years behind public schools and to install AEDs, generally speaking. Of course, there were some that were front runners and had the AEDs the first day they were available, but by and large, most schools waited a couple of years. And I anticipate that independent schools may be thinking about doing that with earthquake early warning as well. Certainly, we don't want to rush folks, and we want to be cognizant that just like AEDs or just like any other emergency preparedness activity or preparation step, this should be integrated into a broader plan, right? I don't want to just install the earthquake early warning system and not create effective training or not do earthquake drills. Ideally, we should be doing goulash drills where we're really kind of building on a foundation of knowledge around earthquakes and earthquake preparedness. But to answer your question, no, we haven't seen anybody actually move forward quite yet. There are a couple of schools who are thinking about it. And I think, or I hope a lot of you that are on the call are thinking about it as well. I would name that cost has been a question consistently, and so we'll shift into cost here in just a moment and share what those costs look like. As with any tool, we anticipate that that costs will evolve a little bit over time, up and down as more folks get to the market, et cetera. But we do have some baseline costs for you that we can share, and these are solid for at least the next year or so.
Hey, Chris, I would add that we do at Early Warning Labs have a couple private schools online. I can't really talk about them right now. One is, I know that one is in the Bay Area that just went on like 2 months ago. And we are doing a pilot at LAUSD with the idea of rolling it out to everyone eventually. But we have several schools involved in an active pilot with this.
Thank you, and good point. I know the folks over at LAUSD were really excited about the rollout, and we should celebrate that a little bit. So they have a very robust emergency management team, and they are tremendously excited about the tool and have been really engaged in sort of thinking about how to train and how to design a program that will engage students correctly and parents correctly. I'll jump into some prices and costs and next steps. I do want to flag, I've seen a couple of chats come in, so thank you so much, Rick and David. I am never quite sure what is confidential and what is not, but it sounds like the ShakeAlert app has been published a couple of times, or ShakeAlert LA app, that is, has been published a couple of times, is adjusting the intensity. So in fact, that adjustment is in the works and or has occurred, and it looks like the drop is going to be somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5. So that's specific to the app alone. One other flag that I want to share, and to the same, by the same token, I'm actually not certain that this is intended to be shared, but nobody told me not to. One of the reasons that the ShakeAlert LA app has been fairly limited in distribution is that there are still a lot of questions about how robust the phone systems are, the cell phone systems are, and what capacity the cell phone systems really have. When the teams first went to the various cell phone companies and said, hey, we've got 22 million people in a city, can we send a message to all of them, a text or a pop-up or a push notification? Can we get a message out to all of them at the same time to notify them that there's an earthquake coming? And can we do it within 5 seconds, which is the required time frame, just because earthquakes move so quickly? The phone companies essentially laughed and said it's not possible. It would crash the phone system. And so the initial rollout of the ShakeAlert LA app was fairly limited, and I believe still is fairly limited to a specific number of users, at least in part because the technology available on the phone systems isn't quite strong enough yet to accommodate that significant surge in messaging. With Amber Alerts, of course, or presidential messages, things like that, they can be emergent, but they're not typically going to tell you to take truly emergency precautions. And so if they roll out over the course of a few minutes, that's okay. Whereas with an earthquake, knowing that the technology is never going to advance so much that we get minutes of notice, it'll always be seconds of notice, we really have to capitalize on that few seconds that we might have to take action and distribute notification. So I want to flag that just because I think a lot of us, as we think about the app and we think about how we might leverage it in our school community, I certainly would encourage you to do that as a first step, but it will not, the app itself will not be a complete early warning system at this time anyway, because it just doesn't have the capacity to be. So I'll jump ahead. There are two kind of structures or two models to think about when it comes to costs for the integration that we've been talking about today. One other flag I want to name is that we've talked about a lot, right? We've talked about the app. We've talked about using the system to trigger multiple activities on campus, powering up a generator, unlocking a gate, opening emergency exits, etc. All of those things are possible, but they're not part of this price point. And I share that because I just want to be very clear that the options that we're looking at here are simply to get the message out through the PA system, through the speakers that we have available to access. And so there are kind of two structures or two ways to do that. The first is if you have an IP-based alerting system. So if you have Informacast, if you have Valcom, if you have wireless PA system in place already, if you have a digital PA system, you can record a message from your computer and distribute it to your PA system. Or if you can dial into a phone number and access your PA system, then it's probably an IP-based PA system. If you dial an extension on your phone and access the PA system, it's probably an IP-based PA system. So if that's the case, then you'll be under the option 1 category. And there are some other tech specs, and we'll help you investigate those and make sure that you are eligible for this or can leverage this tool. But basically, if you can dial into it from an extension on your phone, you've probably got at least the bulk of what you need already. The second option, option 2, is a wired system. And so this is going to require an actual piece of hardware that has to be installed where ShakeAlert connects to an analog system. So I find this a lot in the Bay Area. If you have Bogan speakers, and if the word bogan makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, then that's probably going to be you. If you have speakers that have been painted over, they kind of project out from the wall, and they're maybe half a foot off of the wall, and they've been painted over just time and time again. You likely have a wired system. If you have to go to one space on campus, one or two spaces maybe on campus, and pick up a speaker or a microphone off of probably an old dusty file cabinet, then you probably have a wired system. So that's at least a kind of a quick check, and hopefully you can kind of reflect to yourself the last time you accessed the PA system or somebody on campus accessed the PA system, how they do it. That should give you a pretty good hint. We can talk more about those two scenarios a little bit more after we talk about costs. So our option one, our sort of easier to implement and digital system is at $4,500 per year for the subscription fee, and then a $4K implementation cost. So to set up, design, and plan out the training that needs to take place that kind of goes in parallel with the rollout of the early warning system. So upfront cost is $8,500 and then $4,500 from year 2 forward. If you don't currently have a digital PA system, then we probably should look more closely at your system. And selfishly, there are 2 reasons for this. If you're not using a digital system, you may not have as much flexibility in distributing a message as you want for other purposes like lockdown or shelter in place. And so it might just be a better investment for you to transition to a digital PA system. For those that don't have one, I'm confident you've looked at them before, and I'm confident that you've been, that the costs have been significant. There are some newer wireless models that are starting to roll out where the technology is pretty good. So we can talk about those, and those are much lower cost typically. But having said all that, if at the end of the day we just end up connecting to an analog system, then it's roughly $5,500 per year with a 6K implementation cost. So looking at $11,500 up front and then $5,500 from year 2 forward. I have to underscore that comes with an asterisk, because every analog system is a little bit different and is going to require a different level of tech support to get the system up and running. And so ShakeLA will adjust those costs, or Early Warning Labs, I should say, will adjust those costs on an as-needed basis based on the level of effort required to make the system work. So I'll pause there for a second and get some thoughts. As you're thinking about this, as you're thinking about costs as well, are there any questions that come up for you, or are there any sort of rollout strategies that you're starting to think about?
I've got 2 questions. Is this based on like one school or 2 schools in the state, as opposed to 12 schools, or Martha put something together as a package for Cal-ISBOA? And my second question is, what's involved in the implementation for $4,000 to $6,000?
Great questions.
I'll take that.
Okay.
The second question, then I'll have to have you remind me the first one because I'll get sidetracked, is that there's actually, the cost of the unit that we bring in there, what we build, our proprietary unit, and the software, as well as the design, the actually coming in and doing it, the testing it, the annual maintenance, the upgrades, all that is included in that fee. And then what was the first question again?
First question was group pricing, is what we're looking at.
Absolutely. We will, this is based on a single site, one location, single site. Obviously, we will take into account economies of scale and do custom deals for multiple locations that will have pricing, they're done on one-off, individual agreements that we will put together for you to say, hey, we have to do 20 schools or we have to do 5 schools. The costs will go down incrementally.
I would add to that, that is going to be on a per community basis typically. And so if you're thinking about this, for those of you and I'm looking at names, but Bentley School or Harvard Westlake, Brentwood School, 2 campus schools or multi-campus schools, that's probably where that's going to make the most impact. As far as like, and I forget the term, but there are some kind of group buy options. We don't anticipate that that will roll out at any point in the next year or two. But certainly if you have multi-campuses or if you have a second school that operates within your community or something like that, there's certainly an opportunity to try to find cost savings there.
Well, let's keep up that conversation in the background, please, because Cal-ISBOA has over 270 schools throughout the state. It might be worth talking about, but we'll do that offline. I wanted to just kind of underscore, and this is kind of related, you know, the power of association, and I think one of the most wonderful things about our independent school community is that we do share information, and we talk a lot and we share a lot so that people do not have to necessarily reinvent the wheel every time they make a decision. So one thing that I would really encourage you to do, and Chris, you know this very well after having worked with many of our schools, is that if there's a school that is piloting this, when they're ready to share their experience, it would be really good for you to do that well.
Absolutely. We will, we're planning out our calendar for the 1920 school year now, and we will likely have an October event and then a spring event in both Northern and Southern California. And if we can tie this into one of those two, we will happily incorporate that and give everybody an opportunity to see the system kind of firsthand. There will also be, I would encourage you, those of you who are currently working with us, and frankly, those who are not, we have access to some demo softwares and other tools that we can use to help you conceptualize what this tool will look like and what some of the capacities are. And so if it would be helpful for you, we invite you to let us know, and we're happy to schedule some time, which actually feeds right into our next conversation. As we always do, I'd like to ask everybody to take some action items out of this conversation, whether you want to look at early warning as a technology or not, frankly. But these are, I think, good conversations to have, or good components of thought to have. So first, I would look to find out the make and model of your PA, intercom, and phone system, kind of those 3 things together. If we can't tie into the PA system, maybe we can tie into the intercom system. If we can't that, maybe the phone system. I would start there because that will help define for you, frankly, whether this is a project that you can flip the switch on and do tomorrow, or whether this is a project that might be a winter break or potentially even a next summer project. So I would start there just by kind of getting the assessment of what's possible. Then look around campus and think about who it is that's on campus that needs to be a part of this conversation, and who needs to be sort of engaged, and whether that's safety committee or safety committee plus team leads, or safety committee plus team leads plus senior admin, or some combination thereof. I would strongly encourage you to take a moment to think about that and begin the conversation. Mention that it's a capacity that we can build towards if people are excited and interested in doing so. And finally, if you're somebody who's interested or would like to have a more in-depth conversation about your specific circumstances, whether it's digital or analog, or how you might incorporate it into the broader plan, you can reach out to us, and we're more than happy to have some conversations with you, either on the safety side of it. We'll have those one-on-one, or if there are technical questions, we'll bring in Todd or somebody from his team to help sort of analyze what's possible for your specific technology requirements.
And please feel free, this is Martha, please feel free to share your thoughts with me as well. You know, this is something that, as Chris mentioned, is in its early stages, and I would certainly like your feedback, and we can share some group concerns or questions as well, and And if it's something that you're considering, please share it with me too. I won't divulge it unless you're ready to. So I would be very interested in it.
Are there any other questions that folks have that you'd like to ask before we wrap up for the morning?
One more thing I want to say is that we have been recording this and we will share it on the website. So if there's somebody that you would like to share it with at your school, it will be in the member benefits section of the website. And if you don't know how to get there, you can contact me or Andrea.
I'm sorry, one more question for Todd, please. The approximate pricing that we saw, is that for a school that's got 2 buildings, 12 buildings, 20 buildings on the same?
That's a tough one, because if for instance, if you're in a scenario where you have IP-based phones that cover the entire campus, that would be for one, just hooking it up and you get it campus wide. But if they're disparate systems, it would be per building, per location.
Okay, best thing is that we talked individually with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, we are all individually and together here to support you as questions come up down the road. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. And for those that we won't connect with, have a wonderful start to the school year, a great end of your summer, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.